Hi there, my name is Rick Kwan. I guess I'm the, well, I was the AIAA side of this three-year thing. Okay, so those of you who don't know AIAA, Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, I have a website, but I'm not going to put it back. The shop has just put some stuff up there. There was a request a few months ago from the AIAA San Francisco Section Council to, we have a number of people in the area who are possibly interested in new space developments. They have interesting space ideas. They don't know how to commercialize them. There's a business around them, and they sort of turned to the Silicon Valley Space Center to ask if we could put on a series of workshops to help the technical people figure out how are they going to put together a business plan, how are they going to present their ideas, what do they have to be careful about, and things like that. That's how this whole series came about. So this is the fourth meeting. This is the last one we're going to do for a while. This has been kind of a whirlwind, so I'm not going to do this again until next year, assuming Sean wants to do this. We'll see at that time. Some notes about...
Next year it's going to be a completely different industry. So.
Yeah, so we'll have to redo all the material anyway. So we'll...
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay, so anyway, some words about the stuff that is still coming up. On June 19th, we are going to, we don't know the location yet, so we'll try to get the word out to you. By the way, if you're here and did not sign up officially, so I'm not going to say anything about whether or not you took the food, but there is a sign-up list in the back. If your name isn't on there already, and you want to find out about the events that are coming, put your name on, put your email address on that list so that we can at least send something out to you. Okay. The next event will be on June 19th, which is a Thursday. We're going to have Steve Durst of the International Lunar Observatory Association. They've been working with the National, what do they call it? National Astronomical Observatory of China, the Chinese academic, syndic.
Yeah.
But anyway, so what?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, they've been getting images from the Lunar Near Ultraviolet Telescope on the Moon. On the Chang'e 3 spacecraft, and so he's going to talk about that project and how all that stuff came about. And we'll have to send you an email to let you know exactly what the location is. We're still working that part out. I've been going a little bit crazy on all this stuff, and I think toward the end of this month. So you're hearing this for the first time. I haven't announced this to anyone yet, but given the number of workshops and technical talks and stuff like that. By the way, we normally have a series of tech talks that we do once a month or something like that. Given the number of tech talks and things that we've had of that sort, I'm thinking of doing a Saturday afternoon forum where people can talk about the kind of the issues that they've had with trying to do aerospace projects or explore ideas, or anyway, I'll send out or talk about how they may want to collaborate. I'll send out email about that later in the month. And then July 18th through 20th, the week of the New Space Conference. You guys know about the New Space Conference? Okay, Space Frontier Foundation is putting on a New Space Conference in July. There's actually a lot of stuff going on that week. Toward the end of the week will be the New Space Conference. Before that, during the week, will be what used to be the Lunar Science Forum, which is now called something else. It's Solar System Science Exploration Forum, something like that. And then we are going to try to do a Space Startup Weekend right around that time period. So we'll probably have a bunch of, well, for the local people, we'll have this type of activity, which may then lead into some of these other things. And I guess that's all I'm going to say in terms of announcements. I'll just let you go from there, because I'm out of words.
Yeah, so put in another plug for our June 19th talk. Steve Durst has built a telescope with one of the Canadian aerospace groups, and the telescope is deployed on the Chinese lander, which landed on the moon in, October, November of 2013. So with that, the Chinese also deployed a rover that I believe worked initially, and then it also worked throughout the lunar night. So it should be a very exciting talk. I had to bend Steve's arm to come and give it. But it's Steve, as part of Space Age Publishing, has been involved pretty much for the last decade on trying to build this telescope and get it on the moon. And there it is, and I believe it's still operational. So just being able to get all those details worked out, plus being a U.S. entity working with the Chinese, should also be a pretty good story to hear about, too.
No NASA involved.
Right. So I would encourage you to come for that talk, and then I'll also put in some plugs for everything else. A bit of news for today: Skybox was purchased by Google for $500 million.
Wow. Whoa.
So I don't know. You might Koshla put in $100 million. 2009, 2010, whatever, and now it's valuation of $500 million. So, but I think that's a major inflection point from this industry. And as Rick was saying, well, we may do this next year. Pretty much, this industry is rapidly accelerating. With Skybox's success, you've also got Planet Labs that's going. Peter Plotzer and NanoSatisfy is planning on doing 100 CubeSat. So the era of gee, I flew a CubeSat in space, let me wow you with that, is over. It's pretty much constellations of small satellites, where the constellations are not 20 or 30, but where people are talking about 100, and our friends over at Google are talking about 1,600. So it is really going to be a big boom industry. And so if you're thinking about, gee, I'll wait until next year to do whatever I'm going to do, it's going to be, you might even say, is what I'm going to do going to be relevant? And what is next year going to look like? I really don't know. So anyway, a little bit about Silicon Valley Space Center. As Rick said, this was suggested by the AIAA, and if you look up our SVSC website, which is www.svsc.org, you can see we have our events there. We also have membership options. If you join Silicon Valley Space Center, you get not only Charles Luro's news feed, plus stuff we get from the Commercial Spaceflight Federation, but you also get a subscription to New Space Global, which is actually a phenomenal publication that has its finger on the pulse of this industry. New Space Global provided the initial news story on Google, both for the 1,600 Google satellites and for the possible acquisition of Skybox many, many months ago. So if you really want to find out what is absolutely happening right on the bleeding edge of things, I would suggest hooking up with New Space Global. And then for various companies, we work on mentoring, and then we also work on sponsorships for like the New Space Conference. So this is our fourth series of our last in a series of talks. We have a couple of guests. One I'd like to introduce is Jose, who is actually here from International Space University. Maybe you can give a brief introduction about yourself.
I'm from Puerto Rico. I got a bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering. I initiated a project back home for spaceport development, and I'm currently now here interning at NASA.
Over at the spaceport.
Yeah, on spaceport.
Good, good. And if you remember, I don't know if you guys know, but last year we had a whole bunch of students from Puerto Rico. We had about 6 students that were here working the summer doing greenhouse modules for ISS type activities. So, and our guest speaker for today is Gary Jinks, is in the back, and he'll talk a little bit about pitches and how to do a good pitch. So, and then we'll introduce Gary as we get to it. Anyway, we've had 3 other talks. These are available on the AIAA, some website that Rick's got.
Yeah, if you're, right, if you paid for this and you're on the list, you get the materials.
Okay. And I normally start off by a review of what we've talked about previously, but I'm going to save that to the end as sort of a wrap up. Today I wanted to talk about this, really, it's kind of an interesting publication, that a book that came out in 2010 on business model generation, and it's used as the basis for like the Space Startup Weekend and for understanding about elements of your business. So as we get up to this 4th session, the first session we talked about was about, is startups right for you, and, who's your team? And so as you go through this business model generation, you're going to want to work with your team. These are the people that you're sort of, it's your second marriage. You're really kind of welded at the hip to work these process, to develop your company. And so that's one of the first steps on this, as we talked about in our first session. Our second session, we talked about marketing and about your customers. And what I see as the big issue for the new space industry is sales and customer acquisition, and then long-term customer costs. If you're going after, the example is if you're going after an educational market, it probably has a very high customer acquisition costs, and then the amount of dollars that you get from from that customer probably doesn't balance with the amount of time that you had to spend to go get that customer. So ideally, your customer acquisition costs are less than the lifetime value of the customer. So in this model, you're also focused on your customers and the segmentation ideas about your market. And then the third element we talked about is strategy from Michael Porter, and that is also embedded within business model generation. So, and as I list here, it talks about customers, your value-added proposition, revenue, resources, costs, and so forth, and I'll get into that. And the key, of course, is that revenue is greater than costs at some point, and preferably remain that way after that point. It doesn't have to be true the whole time, but I've got a little formula to remember it by. So, but if you look at the business model canvas, it's structured like as you see here, and it has a number of different areas. And I actually didn't have a laser pointer with me, but I don't know if we have some pointer or something like that around here. But you can actually see, if you look at the value proposition, the chart is actually divided into two sides. There's the what should be your right-hand side on the value proposition over here, and then on the left-hand side, oh, maybe I should have the cursor on this, yeah, okay. So over here, this is all things that are focused on customers, and down at the bottom here, you see revenues. On the left-hand side is everything associated with your business, and down at the bottom here are costs. And so what you want to do when you look at this business model canvas is you want to step through each of these blocks that go from the customers to the value propositions to channels, and I'll go into that. But in case you want to know, but thanks. It kind of reminds me of The Hustler. Yes. Jackie Gleason, yeah. which is like, okay, Fast Eddie, let's play some pool. That was after staying up all night and playing pool. So it's a good movie if you should see it. Anyway, so over here are all your customer sides. Your value proposition is what you're providing to the customers, and then in the back end are all the back office activities. And again, hopefully your revenues are greater than your costs. And so what I'd like to talk about for the next 30 minutes or so is a breakdown of this chart and the kinds of things that you need to think about. When you have this, you basically have literally a large poster that I actually left this over at the office. But what you'll do is you'll take that chart and break it down, and then sit around with your team with a bunch of Post-its and write all the things that are associated with your customers, all the things that are associated with your value propositions. And the thing about Post-its is that you can kind of write all the ideas down and brainstorm them. And then once they're together, then you can kind of match them and see how you could package them into individual entities, which is kind of what we've done here for the Silicon Valley Space Center. And it talked about all our various customers, which are some of the companies we work with, student groups that we work with, the investor types, which are also customers for this, all of our value propositions that we put forward, and then who are some of our partners on the back end here. And this is actually the cleaned up version. The previous version of that just had Post-its all over the place, and you're kind of just nailing them down. But this is it's kind of a brainstorming activity, and then allows you to filter out all of the ideas that are there. And when you do the Space Startup Weekend, this is pretty much where you start. You say, hey, I've got an idea, then you go out and you talk about your customers and all those things. So on these charts, I'm going to go through what are all these different segments, and should get through this in the next 30 minutes or so. So as we talked about for customers, and I always find that you may look at somebody and say, hey, they're already in that business. What is it mean to be already in that business? As you think about this, as you analyze this chart, you can differentiate yourself, what your business is, from some other business. And it's all of these areas, all of these decisions about who your customers are, who your partners are, how you actually generate revenue. And you really have to think hard about it. And so if you look at the business model generation, we've kind of talked about various things. For new space, the mass market, there are probably examples of companies that cater to the mass market. I think Peter Platzer's Nano Satisfy is one of them, sort of looking at the educational market, although Peter is now, again, going after the satellite imaging one. It can be that, you look at a company like Skybox, is it a niche market or is it a mass market? Well, if it's just optical images that go out to Google Maps, I mean, everybody uses Google Maps, and Google set the satellite image, say, hey, where's that building? But you might say in the satellite imaging area, for instance, if you were a company like Monsanto and you were producing genetically modified crops, and those modified crops had a particular spectral signature associated with them, I might build a satellite that's sensitive to that spectral signature. And it might be a niche market for a particular kind of crop, or I might have a multicolor system which is looking at soybeans or corn, and I could just go after it and say, hey, I am like the key person about corn production in the United States as far as satellite imaging. And in that sense, if I was going after both of those, the optical one and the agricultural one, or ocean-going vessels, I might say, well, actually a sort of a large market, but I'm actually going to touch into all of those, and all those markets might need something different. So as you analyze this customer segment side, you really have to think carefully about who is the consumer and what are their actual needs, because their needs, we're all engineers, and usually the engineer starts with, hey, I've got this great product, where's my market for it? But I really think you need to put the customers up front on this and say, well, what is it the customers really need, and then how can I develop a product that meets those customers? Down at the bottom it says multi-sided, which is interdependent, and an example for that was like Citibank and credit cards, that not only do they cater to people that use credit cards, they also cater to the retail outlets that take credit cards for their purchases. And so they got to keep two groups happy. They have to keep the customers, the people that are using their cards, happy, and they also have to keep business owners happy. And the two of them are independent, because if you didn't have customers with your cards, you got no retail people, and if you don't have any retail shops where your card is not accepted, it won't work. So as you look at this customer segment, you want to dig down and really analyze what's important about the customers. And that leads to the center part right here, which is your value proposition. And of course, everyone's wrestling with what is the value proposition for new space. Am I doing research? Am I catering to industry markets? Am I catering to academic markets? Am I catering to the tourism market? And or am I part of a supply chain? We've talked about, as an entrepreneur, you kind of inject yourself in a supply chain. If you look at SpaceX, which is, as they say, vertically integrated. It's not entirely vertically integrated because SpaceX still does bring in some components from the outside. And so SpaceX wants to make sure that those components that come in from the outside, they have to meet requirements, but then they also, you have to, whoever's making those components, like the nozzles for the Falcon engine, they have to be done in a cost-effective fashion, so there's some advantage to SpaceX in purchasing that product. And so you can go down the list here and see, for the customers that I'm looking at, how am I trying to address it? And as we talked about with Michael Porter, there are two things that you can compete on. One is cost, and two is differentiation. Differentiation can mean many things. The differentiation in terms of, hey, you call me today and I'll have your product there tomorrow. This product is lighter and better, cheaper, faster, better than what you guys wanted. And you have to know what are all those parameters that your customer is really looking for. People just don't always say, gee, I want to buy. If you're the government, you have a one-dimensional model that says, I need to make my selections based on cost. So when you look at I think the comment from the Mercury program, which was in one of the movies or something, is you're sitting on top of this rocket and you're realizing that you're sitting on top of what was the technology from the lowest cost bidder in the industry. But cost is not always the issue, and as I say, the risk reduction, accessibility is for people that haven't had it. I've been very interested in developing economies, like if you're down in Brazil. What is the space market down in Brazil? We're working with one company which is looking at how to engage Mexico in the growing commercial space industry. So it's not just, I'm going to go after US markets, but what are all these other markets? There's a book about the world is flat. Well, it's actually not so flat. There are actually big cultural differences as you go around the world. And so as you work with those customers, you might say, well, gee, how do I address what their unique needs are? And you might even say, I'm not even going to do business in the United States because it's already saturated. There's a lot of noise here. I'm actually going to do businesses overseas because I've got to generate revenue. So as you go through with your team and you've got all your yellow stickies, you want to go through all these value propositions, say, what values are we really offering? And we could just say, we look at those values uniquely and just put them down on the business campus and then sort of package them out. And we could have different values for different customers. So like in the city card example, the guys that use the cards might not necessarily have the same needs as the people that take the cards. And you really have to think hard about these things. The third area, which of course is essential, is reaching your customers. And here I've kind of just gone through the list of how you have to reach your customers, because when you think about it, it's not, hey, look, I've got this, you want to buy it, but people, anybody, if you go through, you can buy gas at Rotten Robbie versus Shell. I mean, my own example, just like from 15 minutes ago when I ran out of gas to get her, I was over at the Shell, and I kind of never go to Rotten Robbie to buy gas because I always figure, it's going to screw up my engine or something. But if Rotten Robbie said, hey, why don't you come on in and give us a test drive, and you can use our gas, and we'll figure out how to address your concern that it's not screwing up your engine. I might be buying more of my gas at Rotten Robbie. But if you look at this, just the awareness of things, like nanoracks. A lot of people don't know that you can purchase rides to the International Space Station through nanoracks. And then if I do that, well, what's involved in that? I'm going to put down $50K. Is there some way I can test drive this? Can I partner with somebody else that's already doing it so I can kind of see what the process is? And if you're a company, you want to figure out, how do I lead these people along so that A, they're aware of what this is, they can kind of get some comfort before they start writing the check. Third, of course, is closing the deal on the purchase. And I always figure that in the space industry, that's a tough one here, because engineers are generally introverted, type, some of them are extroverted, but a lot of people are like, I was an engineer because I don't have to interact with people. That's a joke. And it's really a soft spot for everybody. But you got to find somebody that's going to go out and connect with people, and sell your product, and actually close them and say, okay, look, I've addressed all your concerns. What you want, a red one or a blue one? How is it you're going to close them? And then afterwards, even after you close them, you still have the responsibility for making the delivery. How do you do that? How do you make sure that people are happy with that? Again, the nanoracks example is they sent payloads up to the ISS and they weren't executed by the NASA guys. Somehow it wasn't on the checklist, and so they actually came back through the Dragon capsule and they were unexecuted payloads. So it went all the way up to low Earth orbit, came back, and nothing happened to it. That's kind of a major problem. So you got to figure out, how am I going to make good on that? How do I address that thing? And then, as we say, with customer acquisition, you spend all that time to acquire those customers, then what is their long-term value? If you look at Virgin Galactic, hi, I bought a ticket, I flew on Virgin Galactic, how many other times am I going to fly on Virgin Galactic? What else? I think the Branson problem is, what else am I going to sell those guys? Now that I've got them, and I've spent a lot of time catering to them and getting them involved, how do I mean, it sounds cold-hearted, but how do I extract more money from them? How do I deliver more value to those customers? Because I don't want to just spend a lot of time acquiring customers, and then they do it once, and they're like, oh, that was good. You want to come back again and again and again. I don't go get my gas at ExxonMobil because I'm sort of protesting the Exxon Valdez. I used to go to Mobil all the time, but now, so I don't go to. And so now I'm left with, I used to go to Mobil and Shell, and now I'm just left with Shell and Rotten Robbie. So retention is really important. And so as you look at your sales channel, you got to think about all of these things. And then on a little sidebar here, I kind of wrote down, channels that you own or somebody else owns. It could be that you're like, oh, I like the Tesla example for Elon Musk. Elon Musk is like, I make cars and I deliver them to my customers. He wants to be over here where he's got a web page, Salesforce, and a retail outlet that is all under the Tesla control, as opposed to the traditional car market where you have car resellers and distributors. And so Texas and New York want to keep Tesla out of those states because they're not using this partner model where you have separate retail outlets. Essentially, those car guys are buying the cars at wholesale and then selling at retail, and they get the markup, and then you kind of negotiate with them to get the price down and everything. So as you think about your channels, you can think about that too. How do I actually reach these customers? That is a partnership. And again, for engineers, customer relationships, how do you keep people happy? There are a number of people that have sent payloads up to the ISS, and it was expected that they would get a lot of assistance with all the documentation to fly those payloads. And I know that there are a lot of people that are unhappy with the kind of help they were getting. Great business idea. So David's in the back. David actually won the new space business, the space startup weekend last year with his base to space company, which was about that issue, about how do I cater to those customers. And then as you look at that, you could say the kinds of relationships. I can have just personal relationships where I'm working with people. I could have communities, and I can have co-creation. And there are examples of all three of those. Personal assistance is how much hand-holding do people need? Even when you go to a web page and you see something pop up that says, hey, would you like to speak to somebody? It's a combination of both web and personal assistance. Communities, user interactions, if you look at the UAV company that came out of, I kind of forget what it was called. We had a number of people interacting, kind of the open source model. We have a number of people interacting. You're building up a community of users. That could be part of your model too. Manu Sharma from Infinity Aerospace was using that model for his RG labs. And then, of course, co-creation. There's a good company, it's called Threadless, where people design, or Cafe Press or anything. Your community designs stuff, and then that's what you sell. You don't even touch any of the product, but your customers are actually, helping you create product that you can deliver to people. And so as you think about your space companies, you think about all those issues, and it's not all cut and dry. And there's not a right answer or a wrong answer, but you have to be clear about what you're going to do, and then what are all the options that are out there. So, and as we get through, this last half of this, there's a quote by, I thought, just pull this up, that's kind of from Eric Schmidt's Google Plus page. It's kind of, you really can't see it there. It's like a cartoon, but it's, revenue solves all known problems. And so, you can, when you think about revenue, that in itself is a very complicated issue. And you can see here, you can read this for yourself, of all the different options of generating revenue. Certainly the top one, sale of assets. Hi, I have a book, now I sell it to you, now you have the book. But there are a whole bunch of different ways you could slice that. I lend it to you, you kind of read it, you give it back to me, you kind of read it, and then you can sell it to other people later on. And you can look at all those things. And then certainly the most popular down at the bottom for the web-based is eyeballs, which is advertising. So, and again, as you think about your company, you be judicious about how you sell your product, and how you price your product could be related to how you get customers in the door and get them to buy. Do they buy one? Do you sell them a subscription? Do they buy many? Do they get a volume discount? Those are all things you can look at. And on the other side here, like for CubeSats, you could have, and I actually think NanoRacks has gone this model, that slots to the ISS, yeah, they're on a fixed price, but they're also on dynamic pricing, that if you want to pay more, you can bump everybody that's ahead of you. And that could be a plus, because the company's making more money, but on the other hand, there could be a lot of people that are, hey, I thought I was getting that flight. A lot of unhappy customers. If you've ever been stuck at an airport waiting for a flight to get you from point A to B, and all of a sudden you're bumped from the flight, you're not happy. This, I thought I'd put this up because it talks about revenue, and it's probably best if you have a copy of that, but it compares, it's from an article I dug up, that compares the revenue from Apple, Google, and Microsoft. And if you could read the legends there, you'll see that most of Apple's revenue comes from hardware. For Google, and I don't know, I thought that Google was doing the Android mobility play down over here, and it shows this little block, and then I think they were talking about that being sold off to Lenovo a little while ago. This is from February of 2014, but clearly most of Google's revenue comes from the AdWords. And whereas Microsoft, the interesting thing about Microsoft, most of Microsoft's revenue comes from enterprise software, of the software that they sell out to big companies, and the licensing associated with that. And so here are some companies that, you might say, are they software, are they hardware, what are they? And they have all these different revenue chains, and they look at all the different customer segments associated with those revenue chains. And then they cater their product to those different areas. And here are these companies that are differentiating themselves among this whole mix. So as an example of what goes on this whole right-hand side of the chart. On the left-hand side for this, you get some pretty basic stuff that's associated with your back office. Last time we had our friends from Lolness from Perkins Coie talking about IP. Certainly, you've got things like office space and laboratory space and retail space. Here in Key Resources, you're thinking about all those things that you absolutely have to have in order to be successful. You could say, well, what's the phasing of that? Apple was a long way into Apple's history before it actually had retail outlets. It was, but they thought, gee, we need to interact directly with our customers to make that happen. when people are investing in your company, they want to know something about what's the intellectual property you have, what's the kind of brand as you get up. I mean, I've seen people pitch, and as the CEO pitching to investors, what he is he's really, what he's projecting is the brand of his company. And I've seen people that just say, I like the idea and everything, but the guy that's pitching it just kind of rubs me the wrong way on this. I just don't think this is going to work, for no reason other than the individual that's standing up there making that pitch. And so you got to think about, what is that brand? I mean, I know a couple of companies where, they want to be the CEO, but there's no way I would have them get up and do a pitch on this. And that's, it's just going to be a train wreck. And you got to get somebody up there that's able to represent your brand. And even the case, there's one case in here about databases. What are some of the other things that you bring? It's not just all the resources and the IP, but then what are all those relationships that are part of your company? If you do like an open source effort, you have all of those contacts that are kind of working for free or contributing or generating a lot of buzz. That's, in the advertising business, those are all those eyeballs, and that can be important. And then certainly under this category are the specific skills that you need, the people that you're bringing into your company that are high caliber, because that's what the investors are looking for, investing in the team, but then also investing in the markets. And then, as we talked about the first time, you got to make sure that you got enough cash to go through your runway, that you're not going to run out of cash while you're going through this. So the last one, key activities. I thought this was kind of a softer topic, but key activities can be, and I added something at the bottom, which is like quality control. That if I'm producing this product, how do I make sure that the product that I'm working on is actually delivered in a successful fashion, and that customers are really happy with it? Because as you saw, customers can sign up and want to buy your product, but they're just not happy with what they get in the end. And that that was something that you could have paid attention to. All that falls under the key activities area. And for partnerships, I always find this is, I've seen a couple of companies that are like all partnerships. I'm like, I've got this company and then we've got all these partners. And you're like, well, what's in the company then? Right? Partnerships can be good, but you want to make a decision about what am I doing in-house and what am I doing out of house. I don't know if anybody has any examples of, the one good example, but I mean, what are some examples of, if we look at the new space industry about partnerships? I mean, because I think there are a lot of companies that think differently about partnerships. And so I would ask, does anybody have any examples?
There's not many, because most you either have the monolithic companies that have been around forever and they basically bought each other out, or you've got all these startups that are either, you have independently wealthy people who are starting up on their own cash to get going, or you have all these little mom and pop guys that are just struggling to get themselves going.
Yeah.
So I think one of the most interesting crossing both of the borders is when Skybox went to L'Oreal to have them manufacture their spacecraft. They manufactured 2 of them, and that was more of prototypes and development. And then after that, they decided to not become a manufacturing house. In fact, lease out the manufacturing to L'Oreal.
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
I would say outsourcing your manufacturing is always a good idea. There's already enough manufacturing capacity out there. Nobody needs to be in a new manufacturing facility, as a rule of thumb. You also want to take a look at what your core skill sets are inside and what you really want to be good at. You may not even keep all your engineering resources inside. You may decide that your focus is going to be on a certain area, and that's going to be core to you in-house, and you'll outsource everything else. For $100 million it takes to start a manufacturing today, why do it? There's enough other people out there already build stuff. Just go outsource it. They already got nobody in this country is running at full capacity. There's a lot of capacity to get stuff built. So that'd be an example. You'd almost always want to outsource your manufacturing. If you came to me and pitched me that you're going to build a manufacturing company, you probably wouldn't get past the first 10-minute pitch, we'd say thank you. Just too much risk in starting a manufacturing company. That's a good example of manufacturing.
But space business is not quite like the
It will be.
traditional,
It will be.
traditional
It will be.
things, because you need some specialized equipment, specialized INT equipment, specialized facilities
Sure.
that are not
But
in
there's people that are
general
already doing
available
that. There's people doing that
outside.
today. You can outsource
Not
to
a whole
them.
lot.
Yeah, but what you're going to see in this market is you're seeing this market is going to turn upside down. So what you know today, I would almost forget what you know about the space business today. Because what it's going to be in 5 years is going to be a commercial model. It's going to be a commercial model. It's not going to be driven by the same people out there that drive it. It used to be just NASA. It used to be, way back, it was just Rockwell International. And then that spun up into a bunch of companies. So what you're going to see today is a commercialization of the market, which is going to cause a lot of early investing, fast investing, just like they did in the green tech when it started. A lot of investing while people figure out what's going to stick and what's not going to stick and who's going to combine and who's going to merge and who's going to lose all their money up front, which is what happened in green tech, which happens in every economy. But you're going to say the space go through that anymore because the space is no longer driven by the government. It's going to be driven by the same people that figure out how to put the most money in their pocket tomorrow, which is what drives the capitalism. So your space industry is going to go through radical change. It is going to commercialize. Guarantee it.
So, and with that, I would look at like Virgin, right? Virgin and their ticket sellers. You look at Virgin, what they got Will Pomeranz is doing. One is they've got tourism and they've got ticket sellers that are going to go out and sell tickets because they're like, we want to train them to go out and be our travel agents. And those travel agents are not just selling Virgin tickets; they're selling a whole bunch of high dollar, high net worth, products to high net worth customers. On the other hand, when you look at Virgin, then they talk about the research market. They're like, oh, we're going to actually cater to, we're going to actually have all that in-house. So on the one hand, tourism is being handled at a house, and the research community is being handled in-house, right? What is driving those decisions? Because they're both, things that decide, what do you want to have in-house?
But fundamentally, those are just different vertical customers. The ultimate problem at the bottom at the end of the day is still the same company. Whether you're in the commercial side or the cargo side, you still have to build technology to go up and come down. And you can't rely on the same two companies that have been doing it forever. So all these companies are going to get funded because they're going to have an idea, they're going to figure out how to do it better, and then they're going to go out and outsource somebody who already has that equipment, and they're going to get that built. Now you're going to get people in this industry who are going to go out and start making, just like what's going through the medical industry right now. The equipment that used to be the size of this room is now the size of your phone. The 5 companies that built all the medical equipment in the world, now they're replaced by 5,000 companies now that build medical equipment all over the place. And that entire industry went through changes, and that's exactly what's going to happen in this. So if you go into it with the idea of what is today, your entrepreneur and your innovators are going to come out, they're going to create the companies, they're going to go do their own thing, and they're going to make it happen. And so, the idea of buying equipment, sure, there's specialty equipment out there, but you'll have people that come out here that will build specialty equipment for the commercial side of space. That market will be built, will grow. Every aspect of space will grow into all of its same verticals that every market grows into when it becomes commercial.
And if you look at Orbital, right? Orbital was buying their engines from the Russians, and who knew what was going to happen in Russia with Putin, right? Whereas SpaceX is saying we're going to develop our own engines.
Yeah. And it's global. So it used to be, Rockwell International in the 60s, they did all the space. Space USA, they did a lot of the stuff down on the ground. And those days are going to break up. You're going to have countries that are going to be joining together and doing things much more than they did. Capitalism will slide into the space market because it's never been there before.
Mm-hmm. So, and with this, the last part of this is, what are your cost structures? And that's, again, referring back to Michael Porter of, whether you're competing on cost or you're differentiating your product, look at all those issues and then think about, as I scale up, where am I going to get economies of scale? Where are my products going to get cheaper? Hopefully, as you're making more of them, the price starts going down. And you could be that I'm not competing on cost, that I've got some other experience. Virgin Galactic just raised their ticket prices from $200,000 up to $250,000. Right? 200,000 was the offer, bring enough people in, we got 600 people. Okay, now we're going to raise it to 250 because we don't see anybody else coming out. If there was somebody else coming out saying we're going to offer the same Virgin Galactic experience, Virgin might say, oh, well, actually 200, we're actually going to see if maybe we're going to have to drop our prices, but that's not the case. So, and certainly you don't want to lose money on all your deals because, well, you can't make it up in volume.
You're not NASA anymore.
Yeah. With that, so, as you go through this, there are all these issues, and the points on these slides will be available from Rick's website. But I would say that if you look at all of these compartments, you can take sort of the next step as you've identified all these areas and do what are some of the issues about strategy that we talked about in the third session with Michael Porter. You could do the, and I don't have a slide on this, but you could do the 4 forces analysis that talks about what are the forces of customers over here on this end. What are my customers going to do? If you're selling to NASA, that's a monopsony, that you only have one buyer, and so that one buyer is going to have be able to put a lot of pressure on you. Likewise, if I have a key partnership like the Russians over here selling my engines, and I only deal with the Russians on getting my engines, they have a lot of bargaining power. When the Russians decided to send astronauts sell tickets to NASA at 20 million, and then it went up, 40 million, and then it went up to 80 million. That's because one of their partners here is like, yeah, sure, we'll be happy to sell you those tickets, but the price just went up because the shuttle's decommissioned. And all those that, so you can look at what's once you have all your partners identified, what is the effect of all those partnerships on your business? What's the effect of customers on your business? Down below here on cost and revenue streams, you might say, gee, well, let me look at the economy. How is the economy? What kind of money is available for people? How do I, what's the cost of capital that I need to bring in? And then likewise for up above, what are some of the new entries that are kind of coming into the market? So you can kind of take some of the things that we talked about in session 3 and apply it to this business canvas. And here I just put the SWOT sticker on all of those little areas. And you can say, what are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for my value proposition, for my revenue streams, for my customers, for my key partnerships, and everything, and apply that analysis individually to all these areas. And for the last one, and this is actually, I really only touched on a very high level aspect of the business model generation. But what you can also do is you can go through and identify, according to these core business types, what kind of businesses am I really in? Am I in my product innovation? It shows right up here. Oh, you actually can't, I'm sorry, I apologize for this projector that we have to deal with here. But you can see that, you come up with a matrix here of product innovation, customer relationships, and infrastructure management, and then kind of break it down into aspects of the economics and the competition and the culture. And say, I'm in one of these 3 areas. And so if you look at my business canvas, it could be that I'm actually in many different areas. I'm actually in the innovation, product innovation area, where at the same time, I'm also in the customer relationship area. And you can look at that canvas and say, oh, well, here's where the innovation is actually coming in. I could have innovation from some of my customers that are providing product to me that I'm then selling to other people. And so you want to manage those aspects differently. And it's really, I found it to be a very helpful way of analyzing your business, getting everyone's thoughts down, and at the same time being able to structure the conversation and identify those areas that you need to pump up, deflate, get rid of, emphasize, and so forth for your business. And with that, I'd like to, I don't know if there are questions now, but we can transition over to Gary. Gary, I know from the private equity venture capital roundtable event that happens on a monthly basis. He's here with the South Bay Angels.
South Valley Angels.
South
South
Valley Angels, and I think we had Alenax presenting to you guys a little while ago, and so Brian Barrett is now working on, has now moved, has actually been acquired by Google. So, but with that, let me introduce Gary, and then Gary will go through aspects of pitching. And if you just hit the down key.
Down key, all right.
Okay.
All right, well, thanks for the introductions. Give you a quick background on myself. So I'm basically a systems engineer, project manager, business development guy. Spent the first 20 years designing and developing combat vehicles and stealth and night vision technologies through DARPA Night Vision Labs bunch of old folks. So left that at the end of '98 as the system engineering manager at the Advanced Development Center for FMC, United Defense, BAE today, pick one. Anyway, so I worked with a lot of those guys, launched a couple .com startups, then I went back to work. When that crashed, I went to Rockwell Collins and helped them grow from an aerospace company and developed a strong Army ground business for them in communications, radios, soldier systems equipment. They thought I did a good job and wanted to give me the VP job, corner office, all that good stuff. But let me think, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, San Jose, California. That's not going to happen. So anyway, I started my consulting company back at the end of 2004, mainly just helping small companies figure out how to get into military contracts. And then the last big contract I finished on was building trucks. I wrote 3 proposals, won all of those, and then delivered a bunch of trucks for BAE as a consultant for trucks that don't blow up roadside bombs. So we delivered 2,200 of those in like 18 months. We won the contract in June, had the first truck rolling off the assembly line in October.
Wow.
$600,000 a piece. And anyway, so when I came out of that, the economy was upside down. None of my clients wanted to hire me anymore, so I got back into the startup business. So since 2009, I've been focusing pretty much 100% on launching startups. I've probably helped 500 startups get going in the last 3 years. My South Valley Angels, we funded 3 so far this year. I do workshops and work with startups all the time. At any given time, I'm working with 15, 20 startups. So I work in this space a lot. So I deal with my day job, which is I own a company called GLJ Group, which is the consulting company. And I'm the founder and managing director of South Valley Angels, which is my night job, which is we fund some of those companies and we help get going. So with that, I want to start real quick. What I think I'm going to do here is go through some things. We can't get too detailed in the short period of time, so I'm going to kind of go through stuff. Would you guys rather ask questions once we get through this? Do you guys have some questions you want in there? Because we're going to go through this quickly. The first thing I want to do is lay up, yeah, this is a great slide projector. I want to start off with just a basic critical path and where you are. So there's fundamental phases, and when I do these talks, I don't use buzzwords because depending on what buzzword you're in, you might have a different acronyms and words than we have. You know, in my good old days, we used to work with concept exploration and stuff like that. That helps. That's help. I'll talk loud. Don't let you fall asleep. So what we're going to talk about is various different phases. For 99% of you guys out here, I'm assuming everybody right now is what I call the what phase, which is when you develop your idea. That's when you do your business plans, get yourself together, kind of figure out what it is you're going to do, kind of how you're going to go do it. And then somewhere in this phase here, you run out of money, and so then you're going to have to go find some angels or someone like that to get you some more money to get going so you can get past what you're going to do. And so you got your strategy and plan at this point here. You can get you some fun money. Now you're going to get into the real design phase and figure out how it is, what you're going to do. And odds are you're going to probably get through all that phase and run out of money again. And then you're going to probably go out and look for something like your Series A funding from a VC, more in the $5, $10 million range, $50, $100 million, $200 million, depending what products you're building. And then they're going to take you to the point where you're a real business, and hopefully after that you're going to be living off your profits and so forth, not going to round D and F and G and all those other stuff. So the key I think I want to do here was just to get everybody started off where we are. Most of our discussion is going to be what's happening down in these phases right here. I'm assuming that nobody's in production and moving stuff down the road yet. So I'm going to talk real quick just on what are the different types of equity funding so we can all have a platform that we start from. So obviously the first one is the 3 F's, friend, family, and fools. And those you get from your family, they don't really count for much. You get you started, that's usually the bootstrapping that most people go through. But at some point in time you have to go and ask for money. So generally that starts with angels who tend to do the seed and early stage. They will generally fund anywhere from $25 to $1 million. A band of angels, they'll do $1 million. Most angel groups kind of cap out around $500,000. But that's kind of the reach into there, and those are the guys that get you started. They don't have quite the same expectations as the, went wrong button, sorry, what am I at here? Oh, there we go. There we go. I'm going to set the next 2 up and go down here to venture capitalists. The VCs, they tend to be your later stage rounds, A, B, C, D, all those letters you hear out there. Most of them are looking at $5 million and up. Now a lot of what happens in here is you'll notice there's this group called super angels. Because back in the early days, you had the early folks that gave you a little bit of money, and you had the later VCs that gave you a lot of money, and there wasn't anybody else that got you across that bridge. And so these super angels kind of came up and filled the gap. Really what's happening as much as anything is the angels have stayed pretty common, same, but the VCs have just gone down, and now a lot of VCs have moved into the early stages, and they'll give you your 1 or 2 or 3 million, but they may start off in some small milestones and increments to get it up there. But you're seeing more VCs move down into the the lower earlier. Another thing I want to talk about is corporate venture, particularly with some of the stuff that you guys are going to be doing here in the space stuff. Virtually every corporate today has a venture arm. The granddaddy of that was Intel. They kind of started that whole thing. Now there's probably no Fortune 500 or 1,000 company that doesn't have a venture arm involved with it. And those can be a good place to go if you're building something that you think they might be down their R&D or what they're doing. The other area I group things up is what I call the crowdfunding piece of that. You know, things like Kickstarter, where you go and give them a t-shirt for selling your products. The jobs bill came in, which is going to create companies like Kickstarter, which you can go out and do it to invest through them, but they're going to get equity. You don't have to give them a t-shirt. And I kind of put incubators and accelerators into crowdfunding, because really what most incubators and accelerators are investors throwing a bunch of people in a building so they can find the 3 Googles and Facebooks in that group and so forth. So it's kind of a crowdfunding that's just putting a lot of fish in one barrel. And it's all about the investors in most of those cases. So now let's talk a little bit about, before we go ahead and talk about, I want to talk about what the decision process, just real quick, what the process is. So in the Valley here, the very first thing if you call an investor want to get some money, they're going to say, great, sounds good, send me your executive summary. Your executive summary is a 1-page. You're either going to email that to them, send it to them. It's a 1-page story that's extremely compelling that gets them to say, wow, I like this, let's invite them in to come pitch. So if you send me your executive summary, it goes through the screening, a couple things will happen. One, you'll hopefully end up on the yes side and we'll say come back. Unfortunately, a lot of times at that you'll come in the no side, and the common answer that people give you when you get your resume rejected is, we put your file on, we put you on file, we'll have some yada yada. The common in the investor world is you're too early for us, which I find to be a real strange response when it's coming from a seed investor. But anyway, that's okay. That's just seemed like a strange response. But that's usually what you get for a lot of times. Hey, you're just too early for us. So you're going to go through the screening process, and this can happen in a couple different ways. For South Valley Angels, we screen internally. For people like, if you go talk to Carol, there's some of the folks like at the Angels Forum or Band of Angels, Sandhill, any of those guys. A lot of times I have a screening process inside where they'll have you come in and you'll actually get to do a little bit of a pitch. And they'll do those kinds of screenings, but it depends on where you're at. But normally your screening process is usually screening off of your executive summary. Once that gets done and you get the call back that, hey, we like your executive summary, you'd like to come in and talk to us a little bit, tell us a little bit more. In this Valley, that presentation is generally 10 to 15 minutes with Q&A, anywhere from 10 to 12, 15 slides, depending how well you talk and how well you speak on those kind of things. But you'll come in, do that presentation, they'll ask you a few questions. In most cases, you'll have about 30 minutes with your Q&A, sometimes 45, depending on the group. Once that's done and you didn't get the thanks, we'll call you when we're ready. And then the next thing what will usually happen is they'll invite you back for a deep dive. And normally they'll put a group together. So with South Valley Angels, we actually identify the most interested investor. He becomes the project lead for that. And then they'll invite you to come back, and they'll probably spend a couple, 2, maybe even 3 hours with you. Then they'll ask you to bring everything you got. Bring your business plan in, bring your team in, bring everything, and they're going to sit down and just ask you a bunch of questions. Now, from South Valley Angels, we've never had anybody come out at the end of deep dive and not get funded. And in most investment groups, if you survive the deep dive, you're going to get funded because that's when they're going to do all the work. The only likely thing that's going to happen after that, and the next step, of course, is the classic due diligence. And in reality, all the due diligence really is the negotiation of the term sheet. Because by the time they get to the due diligence, all the investors know whether they're going to invest in you or not. We're trying to find out now is whether you lied to them. They may go out and look and see which states you have felonies in. They may go do some background. But the due diligence is really when the investors spend their money, because now they'll bring the legal team in, they'll do a legal term sheet. So now the investors are getting invested in you by showing interest. Rarely will you get to due diligence and fail at that point. If so, then the angel group or the investor group you talked to erred way back when, that you shouldn't get to due diligence and then find out that they're uninterested. Because really you should just be negotiating your term sheet at that point. So that's the fundamental process you go through. So what do you need to go through that process? Well, one, you have to have the right team. If you're at early stage, you may only be you, but I would say try to build a team as quick as possible, because the investors are much more excited to fund teams than individuals. Although it does happen with individuals, it's not that it doesn't happen. But there's a lot of risk from an investor side for an individual. If that individual dies, gets whatever, your money's gone. There's no recourse back. So build a team. So what does that mean? So when I look at a team, you have to have somebody who's got the technical background that understands what it is you do. Next thing you have to have is a business person, and when I say a business person, that's really where you want to leverage your your strengths with your business person. You want a business person, you know, if your customer is going to be Virgin, then you want to have somebody that can pick the phone and have a meeting with Virgin tomorrow. You don't want somebody that can make 400 cold calls for 6 months and eventually get a meeting with Virgin. I mean, anybody off the street can do that. So you want your business person, you want somebody that's got some experience in a startup or a small business. If everybody in your team came out of Boeing, you're probably going to struggle running a company because you don't have the resources that you spent your whole career having available to you. So you need to have somebody that's had some experience. Now everybody says you want somebody with experience with a successful exit. Not necessarily. Experience, period. I've seen situations where successful people have exited, and if you ask them how, they're going, I don't know, I just seemed to be in the right place, everything moved along, we got funded, we got this, but we got bought, and I was successful. Okay, that's nice, didn't learn a lot. However, if somebody that fails, I can guarantee you they know exactly why they failed. So having failures is just as strong as having success. Having success doesn't mean that you know how you got there. So then that's what I call specialties, and those might be people in your vertical space, particularly your guys' area. People that maybe have things like regulation. You know, there's probably a lot of regulatory things like that. And these are your advisors, people that are on board that just kind of you call them up and you need an answer. Say, man, you know, does this regulation affect us? You know, those kind of things. Sort of like your legal guy. Only I don't put them as specialties. They're just kind of a necessary evil. But anyway, so I think those are the people you need to have on your team to have a rounded out team. Next thing you have to have is your documents, and we're going to talk more about this later. This is really what we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. But you have to have your documents. Starts with your executive summary, that's your resume, that gets you in the door. Then you got your 10-page presentation, which lets you get them compelled to take you down and actually sit down and spend some time to understand who you are and so forth. And then you have to have your business plan. Now, the business plan is the last thing you're going to show them, but I would argue the business plan is the first thing you write. Because if you haven't written your business plan and spent enough time kicking the rocks around to understand all the possible questions and all the things that go on and putting your yellow stickies on your canvas and understanding your lean startup and all the various things of getting going, then there is no way you're going to do a quality 10-page presentation, and I can guarantee you won't narrow that down to one page. I can look at a resume, I can look at a one-page executive summary, because I've seen so many of them. I can look at it in 30 seconds, I can almost tell you if you have a business plan or not. If you've got a business plan, your executive summary is concise, it's got hard numbers in it, it's got metrics, it's got measurements, it's got things dialed down. It doesn't have, we're going to be a viral Facebook, yada, yada, yada. And so your business plan is important. A lot of people will tell you you don't need a business plan for this process, and that's kind of true until you get towards the end, and companies have been funded without it, but I say it's your best interest as an entrepreneur to do your business plan and think over everything as many times as you can so you know what the answers are and you can get there effectively and efficiently. Your business plan is never done. And also, for the people in this room, if your business plan is more than 20 pages, it's way too long. I'd say most people, when you start your business, you're going to have a 10-page business plan. It'll change and grow. If you downloaded an 85-page template off the internet, start over, go back to zero. Because one thing we do as investors, we don't want to see a template, we just want to see your ideas. Your ideas will go a lot farther than any templates and any generic work. Okay, the third thing you have to have is some passion. So, one of the things we saw in the last few years were unemployed engineers that decided, I'm not getting a job, so I'm going to make a startup. And when people are talking, you can sort of get that sense. So I'll actually stop in the middle and say, you know, this idea isn't really resonating with me. Do you got another one? Oh, yeah, I got a couple really good ideas. Wrong answer. You want passion. You're going to your grave with your idea. If I cut you, you're going to bleed this idea. As an investor, I don't want you to have any other ideas. You're going to your grave with this one. If not, then heck, I'll give you money, you're going to get a job tomorrow, and I'll lose my money. So passion's got to be there. And the last one is traction as soon as possible. Traction does not necessarily mean revenue, although that's the ultimate traction. It can be a variety of things. When you're brand new and young and just getting started, you sure don't have any revenue, but you may have some customer lists of people that would be references, or may have some letters of intent that people would be interested in your product, or you may have a variety of people testing your products or things like that. So this is primarily what you need to get going down this path. So what we're going to do is talk about the executive summary, and then I'm going to talk a little bit. I'm going to spend most of our time. Feel free to ask questions, because we're going to talk about it. So I'm actually going to go through and give you a format. So when I do an executive summary, one of the things I like to do from a psychological level is I like to create a frame and a box with a frame around it. Can't really see anything in here. Do you want to turn the light on just a second? Okay. So how you do it doesn't really matter. It's all up to you. But you've got a page right here, and you got a marker that doesn't work. Let's see here. There we go. That looks better. Okay. Right hand or left hand? Well, I talk about a box right here. We'll do a box right there. And that's going to be your summary box. And the reason for that is when you read a piece of paper, your eyes will inherently go to either a box on that page or a picture on that page. It's just the way we work. When we look at a page, if there's a box, you're going to go and read what's in that box first. Whether you know it or not, it happens psychologically. So that's the way you want to do the same thing. So when I get an executive summary from a company, I get 50, 60, 70 of them a month. And those not counting the ones of the companies I'm working with. So I don't have a lot of time to read them. If I glance at your summary, just like a resume, if I spend 10 seconds on it and I'm not compelled, I'm moving on to the next one. So what you want to do is come up with this summary box and make this a box. So we're going to have 3 different parts we're going to talk about here. Let me make this a little shorter here. Let's clean this up a little. All right, there you go. There's your box, and here's the section down here. Right now we're talking about the summary box. Go ahead. Your question? Yeah.
We're in the middle of our business plan process right now.
Okay.
And we're told just don't even touch the executive summary until the very end.
Absolutely. It's the last thing you do. That's why I said the first thing you do is your plan. Then once you got that down, now you can take that plan, you work it way down into 10 slides. Once you got that clean and all your things are clean, then you take that and you squeeze it down to 1 page. If you go the other way, it's pushing the needle from the wrong end. You can't get concise before you've done the big work. So you're right. You're absolutely correct. That's the last thing you do. So on our box, so we're going to do a box here so that when I read this, your eyes get hooked into this box. And this box is going to compel me to read the rest of this page. And what you're going to do in that box is going to give me the simple. What do? Real simple. 1 line, 2 line. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be full of a bunch of marketing spin. Just tell me what you're doing. You know, we're making a widget that does this and that. Perfect. Now I know what to do. Okay. Next thing, why is that important? Give me something in there that why you're important. And what this really is kind of a little bit of a little touching of the problem, or why do customers want this. But along with the statement of why you do it, kind of let me know why it's important to somebody, or why does anybody care. The next thing I want to see out here, so you got your name, and you got your little website right there, and you got your little blurb of who you are, and why you're important, and why this is a cool idea. And then you're going to have what I call your wow factor. Everybody's got a wow factor. It takes a little while to figure that out. But that's the one thing you can sit down there and tell me about your thing that's kind of like wow, or something your company has done up to this point that's kind of wow. Everybody should have a wow factor. And that's where your marketing people come in. They're good at that. So for example, one of the clients I work with right now that I use a lot for my workshops, they put a kit on your pickup and convert it into a hybrid. So they've been driving their F-150 now for about 2 years. This is the 3rd generation. They get 35 miles per gallon in the city, 40 on the highway. Actually get about 48 on the highway, and 600 horsepower. That's double everything that a Ford F-150 has. Gas mileage, power, everything. Okay, so their wow factor is that they're getting 30 miles per gallon in the city, 45 on the highway, compared to 16 and 18. And they're 600 horsepower. So those are kind of their little wow factors that do there. So everybody's got a little wow factor. So you got to have something in there that catches my attention. You don't have to, keep in mind on your executive summary, you don't need to justify any of your wild ass claims. That's what the presentation's for. If you make enough wild ass claims and get them excited, they're going to call you and say, wow, that's pretty interesting. I'd like to hear the rest of this. Because I don't believe any of this so far. But that doesn't matter. You got in the door. You got where you wanted to get. You got the meeting. So anyway, so you don't have time. You have 1 room. So you don't have to justify it. Don't give me background. And just put it out there. If they want to know, say, hey, no problem. Come in. I'll show it to you. Okay? So if you have on there a little bit of your ask and what are you going to do with the funds, now this isn't a big detailed thing. It could be something like I need $500,000 for 24 months, which will take me to profitability. Or it'll take me to a prototype. Or it'll take me to... Anyway, just let me know kind of what that's going to get me. Is that going to get me a really good presentation? Is that going to get me an MVP? Is that going to get me a full prototype? Is that going to give me a certified test vehicle? What am I going to get out of that? So give me a real cool little thing. And the next thing I want on there is show me some of your team skills so I can look real quick and say, hey, those teams have there. Now here's an important thing about teams. I really don't care who's on your team. If you got Larry Ellison on your team, you might want to mention him. You know, if you got Mr. Brandon on your team, Branson, yeah, you might want to mention him. If you got, Billy, Peggy, and Sue, I don't care. What I really care is what skill sets do they have, and do they have the skill sets that can allow you to be successful? So I don't really care that you got Peggy who worked here. What I care is that Peggy understands inertial guidance systems, and Peggy understands this, and when I look at your product, I go, oh, looks like they've got the skill sets to do what they say they're doing. That's usually what I see a lot of people do. They'll provide names and resumes, information. Here's Billy, and he worked here, here, and here. what did Billy do there? So we really want to know what your skill sets are, because most of you aren't really that famous.
Can you be missing a certain skill set?
What's that?
So if in your team, can you be missing a certain skill set?
Absolutely. In fact, you don't have time to do it here, but you might, what you want to do in your slides, where you have a little bit more room, is actually identify what you're missing. And let us know that you know what you're missing and why you're missing them and where you're going to go find them. So for example, a lot of times for the technical guys that are in here, generally they don't have their sales guy. They don't have their business guy. So we got to go find this good business guy. Now the reality, that's the easiest guy to find, because that's the first thing you want to ask your investor for. Mr. Investor, besides your money, what else are you going to do for me? You sort of want to go in there with the attitude, I can get money anywhere. What I need from you, I'm really here to talk to you, Mr. Investor, because you have some vertical things that work for me. It looks like you've got some contacts to the customers I want to get to. You probably have a good business guy. So you want them to help build your team. Yeah?
If you outsource, say, your coders or something like that, developers, right, would you include that in the skill sets on the exec center?
What I would do is I would identify the skills. Absolutely. There's a little bit of BS that goes along with all this stuff. You always kind of push the envelope. So you don't want them to initially think that you don't have what it goes. So you want to let them know, if you outsourced it, no problem. You got a full engineering team that knows HTML5, yada, 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 whatever the case may be. So on this, you don't have a lot. So this is more about identifying what you got. Then when you get into the meeting, then you can pull the onion back a little bit and say, oh, here's what I'm missing, and here's why, and here's what my perfect business guy would look like. So it's important to know what you don't have and what you would put in that spot as it is to know what you do have. And as you'll notice, Bloody Star has what you do have may only be there a week. So it may not last long, so that list may change a lot. So then at the end of this thing down here, you're going to put your classic little point of contact, call the CEO Bob. So if you've done that part right, then I should be able to say, oh, you make kits that make trucks hybrid. Cool, I don't know anybody that does that. You got this, you got that, you're patented, you got these, you got all good gas mileage, you got 50,000 miles on your vehicle, it's third generation, you've got a DoD contract for $2 million already. Wow, I'm going to read the rest of this. So now I've given some reason to read the rest of it. Now we're going to go into the second box, which is this box right here. And I call that the why you box. And the why you box, that's where you do the classic thing. So how many people in here have heard the thing, you have to be solving a problem? That's the classic thing. So you always start with your problem. What problem are you solving? Now I will expand upon that a little bit. I disagree. I don't think you do have to be solving a problem. EA Sports has made a buttload of money without solving a single problem. When you can come out with a video game on Friday and sell $1 billion worth by Monday morning, that's not solving any problem. So you have to be solving one of two things. You're either solving a problem or you're solving a desire. If somebody has a desire something, it may not be a problem. If they desire it, that's as good as a problem. Most people would argue that a Porsche does not solve any problems. How many people would love to have one of those sitting in their driveway? Anyway, okay, so your why you is your problem and your solution. Now another area that tends to happen in this area is limit the technical. It's not a design review. All I really need to know about your product is just enough technicality so I know what it is. The technical people love to load it up on all the technical stuff, and as an investor, I may not even go that deep. I really don't care. I'm really looking for the whole business formula here, not just technical. Besides, if the best technical solution always won, we wouldn't have spent the last 20 years watching VHS. We've been watching Beta, but it lost. Other people lost out to Dolby, but hey, we're doing Dolby anyway. So being the best product, the best technical does not get you down the road. The reality is a high-quality team will sell a mediocre product a lot better than a poor team will sell a great product. So it's the mix of everything together, not any one thing. But I want to understand your problem is and your solution. Now, if you tell me that you got problem 1, 2, and 3, then when I look at your solution, I want to see a solution for problem 1, 2, and 3. People tell me the problem, then they go and give me all these feature sets. And I don't know how that solves any of the problems you just gave me. So make sure that when you identify the problems, that your solution exactly regurgitates, the problem. And that is critical to tie that together to understand what you're doing. The other thing we want to know is your differentiators, benefits, not necessarily features. And differentiators can be a variety of things. Like you said, it could be a technical differentiator. Your business model might be different. So one of my clients, which happens to got her start by being on the project team for for growing produce on the space station and the Mars project, she came out and started a franchise business for greenhouses, for hydroponics greenhouses. And her biggest differentiator, beside her software and some of her technical stuff, which a lot of people have similar kind of things, is she's the only franchise model in the entire agricultural business. Which is why she got a 7-country rollout in Africa, because everybody outside the United States loves to invest in American companies. They just love buying American franchise. They'll do that all day. So anyway, so she's really neat. She's the only franchise in the industry. System runs on your iPhone, so there's a lot of stuff. So in technical, you can line those things up. So understand what your differences are, what the benefits are, and make sure you understand the difference between benefits and features. They're very different, very distinctly different. If somebody comes up, a car salesman will come up and tell you, hey, this car, the best feature of this car is it's got 4 doors. Okay. And it says, but so that's nice, but now what's the benefit of 4 doors? So let's spin that around. So when the salesman wants to come and give me a benefit, he says, oh, I see that you have your parents with you. You notice this is a 4-door. They can get in and out of the back seat extremely easily. I see he's got a bad back, a little bit of a limp, no problem. So the benefit is getting in and out of the back seat, not having 4 doors. So understand the difference between that. The other key thing that comes down here that you want to understand a little bit on here is your roadmap. Understanding what is it going to take to get there, what's it going to cost you to get there, just a little understanding of what you're going to do. I'm going to do this, I'm going to go release it in Europe first, then I'm going to come back and do this. So a little bit of a roadmap so you got a sense of where it is you're going. So once you're done with that, now I know who you are. Now I want a little bit. Now down here what I tend to do is then your marketing and your financials. And this is all the obvious stuff. For starters, who wants what you have? Does anybody want it? So who wants it? What's the size of it? And now, my little soapbox on size. Everybody talks about you got to be in $1 billion market. You know, if you're not in $1 billion market, don't even come talk to us. These are $1 billion market. We're in a global economy. Everything you sell is going to be everything's $1 billion market today. It doesn't matter what it is. So I'm not that impressed when somebody comes up and says, oh, I'm in a $10 billion market. Everything's in a $10 billion market. What I'm more impressed with is you understand the market you're in, where you fit, where you're at, how does the dynamics in there drive what you're doing. And the reality is, if you tell me you're in a $20 billion market, I'm not going to go do the research to find out if you're right. You know? But in general, the markets are always big. But some people love that, so you got to have the big numbers up there. So what you want to know, who wants it, what's your market size, who are your competitors, how do you fit in that? And that's always a tricky area too, and doing competitors. Let me give you a couple of rules on the competitors. Okay, don't do the table that we all see, which is, like a good old table. Here's all the good features, here's your competitors, you know, here's you, here's everybody else, you're yes, there, no, we still know. You know, you've got all the checks, they don't have any of the checks. It doesn't really say anything other than the fact that you've probably handpicked the features you wanted to identify because those are the ones you beat everybody at. And we know that. So some of the better ones, we get a couple ideas on some better ones to do real quick. So there's a couple that give you a lot more. I prefer the bubble charts. You can do them in 2 ways. You can do them like this. Normally these things tend to be like cost, and this is some sort of a performance or some feature. And the idea is you want to have the highest performance and the lowest cost. But your competitors will be around here. And then I can look at this and see that, okay, so you've got a couple competitors that work out here in your performance level, and you got 3 folks out here that work out in yours. And you can tell a lot better story. If you got a lot of information, you can do a quad chart. The difference is you have to have 4 different accesses. It gets a little more complicated and those kind of things. And for some reason, people think that the sweet spot's right there, but that's the confused spot. That says you don't really know what you're doing. Because nobody's really in the middle like that. Nice. But I've seen people try to do those charts. Oh yeah, see, we're right in the middle. Well, that's confusing. What do you do? You know, these guys are up here. They focus here. They focus here. Focus here. You're not focused anywhere. So anyway, so one of those kind of there are much better. You can actually select a couple good measure bases that do the same thing as those tables that paint you in the best possible image. But it gives a little more insight, and you can do things. You can change the size of those bubbles based on maybe size or other things. So you can actually get 3 different things kind of blended in there, and it provides a nice visual. But anyway, so the market is important. And it's really important to understand the dynamics of your market, because that will actually drive more than anything. So the comment I made about earlier about the difficulty of the space right now. If people start up in the space station today and try to use the same mentality that goes, we got NASA, we got this, that, and other, they're going to fail, because this market's going to go commercial. You got guys out on the sidewalk going to come up, build their own stuff, and they don't know the rules that used to be there, and so they have no limitations. They're going to go put a team together, boom, boom, boom. They're going to build it. You're open the paper, and wow, these guys launched that. How the hell did they do that? Because that's what's going to happen. That's what happens in capitalism. You know, that's where we're going, and everybody will create their stuff. You get people that specialize in special tools and all sorts of stuff to make this whole industry fly. Then the key thing on here is let us know a little bit about how you make your money, because that's going to tie into supporting how the financials that you're giving us, which we don't believe anyway. And so that's your piece down here. So this gives us your market, your competitors, your financial. You have your nice little chart down here. It says you're going to be making millions out here. And that's why we want to invest in you. So that's kind of your one-page executive summary. Now, we're talking a little bit about the investor presentation. Now, the key to the investor presentation is really nothing more than an expansion of your executive summary. And if you did it right, like we talked earlier, it's actually a reduction of your slides, so it's going the other way. But to expand on what we did here, so now what you're going to do in your slides when you get called in is you're going to go and you provide a little more detail, a little more supporting data, maybe actually even validate or justify some of those wild-ass claims you made on your executive summary. And you've got room now. You got 10 pages. You got a little room to do some stuff on here. Now let's walk a little bit about kind of how there's a variety of things to do here. Pretty much everybody in the industry wants the same information. Investors aren't really complicated people. They're real simple. One, they want to know how to reduce their risk and how they're going to make a lot of money. If you can tell them how to reduce their risk and make a lot of money, you will get funded. It just works that way. That's where the art and the science comes in, is how to do all that stuff. And like I said, this industry, the space industry, is going to be real interesting for a little while because it's going to be really exciting, and a lot of people are going to invest a lot of money real early on, and a lot of those people are going to lose all of their money. And then there's going to be no more investing in the space area for a while. We tried that, or we got burned. We're not going there. And then mergers and acquisitions will happen, and things will start happening. It'll settle down, and everybody will start figuring out which technologies are real and which ones are still gas for a while, and then the money will come back in, just like they did in solar. Everybody invested in solar early on. Everybody lost all their money, including the U.S. government. And then everybody said, okay, let's hold off for a while. Let's figure out what's really going to happen. They all came back and said, well, guess what's going to happen? China's going to kick our butt forever in the solar panel market. So we're only going to invest in people that do the infrastructures, do the installation, build it, put it all together. We're not going to invest in the people that do panels. Now, does that mean somebody might not come up with a new panel really good? But that's nice. But right now, China, they subsidize 50% of the cost of their panels. So unless you're building at 50% less than China, you can't even play in the game. So anyway, so this goes to some of the things you're deciding as you're doing your business case. How are you going to really do it? So let's talk about your presentation. So the way I like to do it, and you'll find that like a resume, before you go out and do your pitch, your slide deck is just part of it, and your executive summary is part of it. The real thing is to understand when you go to do your pitch, go out and do the research on the company, the investors, or whoever you're pitching with. Understand who they are, what are their buttons. Because just like going and interviewing for a job, it's kind of nice to know what the company does you're interviewing for. It's kind of nice to know what their thing is and how they work. So do the same thing when you go to talk to an investor. And if team is like huge and they keep stressing team, then make team your second slide. Whatever the case may be. But here's a flow that I kind of like that allows you to tell your story. Excuse me. So one is to define the opportunity. When I start off on the first page, I like my first page to say opportunity. And let me use my truck guys for an example, just since everybody understands trucks. They're simple, it's not complicated, it's not a website, there's no fancy business model associated. You build it cheap and sell it for more. So in their case, their opportunity starts off, you start off saying, well, actually these guys are going after every single truck anywhere in the world, because they fit on everything. But the real opportunity they're going at it right now is the U.S. fleet, government and fleet market. So you start off by saying the opportunity is the $14.5 billion U.S. government fleet market. In your case, you're going after the $200 billion, space injector, or whatever the case may be, or motor, or rocket, or maybe you're going to build everything. But anyway, whatever you're going to do, you define that opportunity. Now, on your opportunity pages, you want those numbers to be as big as you can make them, because it's all about big at this point. You're just getting their interest. So you're going to go after this market. Now, why are you going to go after this market? Well, there's reasons to go after this market. Well, what are those? One, the space industry is changing. It's opening up. There's opportunity. There's all these things. In the truck guy's case, well, there's government mandates that are coming out that says, thou shalt do this. And if you're a government fleet manager, thou shalt do this and have 20% of your vehicles will be electric. Well, there's no electric vehicles. So if you're the only one they can buy from. So there's things coming that are forcing it. Are there regulations? Are there changes? Is there reasons coming that make this want to happen? In my truck guy's space, they've got this pesky thing called $4 a gallon gas and continually climbing. So there's things that are driving this market to do it. Now the next thing you want to do on that opportunity is you want to instill to them that opportunity is now. Well, why is it now? Well, it may not be, but you want them to believe it is. Anyway, so if you can come up with a reason why it's now. In the case of our truck guys, 8 states just signed the next wave of incentives. So if you bought a Ford F-350 and put this kit on it, the state of California will give you $25,000 back in cash. Well, you start doing the math on that, it's like, well, I'm not gonna go buy the diesel option, I'm gonna buy this, one of these kits on it, I'm good to go. So understanding the reasons and what drives that opportunity. It's not just big numbers, a lot of times it's timing and market dynamics. So define all at the beginning. So when the guy's done with your first chart, he's going, wow, okay, I get it, big market, a lot of things happening, there's drive, there's reason to do it now, okay, good. Then you're gonna go boom, now you're gonna talk about, well, but here's the problem with this opportunity. So you're gonna define your problem or your desire, and how you solve it. So that would be your next slide, and that's going to be a real simple. Again, it's not a big defense. You don't want to get in a lot of technical detail and confuse the people. Just basically say, my truck guys, here's a picture of the truck. Here's the 6 parts we put on your truck. Double your gas mileage, minimize this, do this, meet 2016, meet all these things, and you're done. If anybody wants any more details, they'll ask you. Because really what we want to understand is the business and everything else along with it. So, once you've done that, now you're going to go, what are the differences? We talked a little bit about that. Why are you different? And here you want to balance it between technical and business. And everything shouldn't be that we're technically better. Sure, there's technically better is good, and there should be some technically better, but you're better for more than just your technical reason. If it's all about technical, you'll probably lose. So you have to balance out your technical and business and why you're better. So for example, my truck guys, they have one main competitor, which is called VIA Motors. VIA Motors takes a Chevy pickup, rips the body off, pulls the engine out, pulls the fuel tanks out, pulls the exhaust off, takes the transmission, everything out, and then puts all their stuff in it, puts it all back on, puts a VIA Motors tag on it. Now they go down, it's a new VIN number. It may look like a Chevy, but it's no longer a Chevy. It's a VIA Motors truck, made by VIA Motors, sold by VIA Motors. Now our truck guys, they just put a kit on your truck, which goes on in about 8-9 hours. So you can go down to Fremont Motors right now, order a truck, tell me you want an Evios truck on it, and you can have one delivered. So our rollout model isn't to build a manufacturing facility and open up dealerships. We just call Ford dealers and say, hey, we got a great Ford truck, the hybrid, how would you like to have one? Oh my God, I've been waiting one forever, talk to me. So we roll out to the dealerships. We just bring the dealerships in. So that's one of the things that makes this company really unique is their scalability. They can scale overnight. So they've already got 2 Ford dealers in California where you can buy these parts, and they're just going to continue growing them across the country. So explain your differences and balance your technical with your business. And, the other thing is, again, we talked about the market. Can't stress that. Where do you fit in the market? Because that's where most people get shot down. Is their market fit isn't quite right, or it's not understood, or the team's not looking at that. Well, great idea, but nobody seems to know where they fit in the market, and they're not sure how they make money. In the hardware business, it's pretty simple. Hardware hasn't changed for 200 years. You build it cheap, you sell it for more. The software business changes constantly. There's still, a lot of industries are still trying to figure out how to make money in the software business. You know, there's only one industry that's consistently made money through there, and we won't go there. So it started off with clicks, and then it was going to be eyes on, and then it was going to be ads, and then it was going to be premiums and freemiums. And what you find is every market segment handles those differently, and a lot of those failed in certain markets, and certain ones won, and so forth. So how you make money and how you fit and all that is really a difficult thing in the software side. Hardware, it's simple. And next one is that you have to convince them that you have the team to execute all the stuff. And if you get that through your statement and get through there, the one thing I didn't put in here in detail is the classic, use of funds, how much money you want, what's the use, and you're going to show your nice little pie chart that says you do it. So here's my word of wisdom on when you're doing your use of funds. Okay, you always got a bunch of stuff. You're always going to have product development cost. You're always going to have sales and marketing costs. Now, if an investor had his way, that's the only cost you would have. Because all they want to see you doing is developing a product and selling it. Everything else is just a waste to them. However, the world doesn't work that way. So we've also got other things. So you've got these things down here like salaries and facilities and all these other things. So what's the one word that investors never want to hear that you're spending money on? Salaries. They never want you to spend money on salaries. Even though they recognize you have to have salaries, you have to have employees, but the reality is, so nowhere on your chart will you ever say salaries. What you'll say is operations. And operations is a global term because everybody has to have operations. And operations is all those little things that just run up. Now, when you put this together, you may have a couple little things in here that are unique to yourself, but at the end of the day, you want these two to be bigger than that one. Miners, just little stuff. And probably not that hard to do, because the reality, it gets kind of funny. So what you want to do is, if it turns out that your operations are really all engineers and marketing people, well, guess what? Those salaries get buried in there under product development marketing. But never put salaries out there. Just don't want to see it. Just don't bring it up. So, when you're all done doing all this good stuff, there's going to be absolutely no doubt in my mind that you have the right solution and it's real. That's a biggie, is that it's real. A lot of people have really good solutions, but it becomes kind of obvious when they're looking at it. I'm not sure you're going to get this all through. But you have the right idea, it's real. You have the right team to execute it. You have customer demand, and it's large. You have a well thought out roadmap, and you know the cost to get there. If you can instill on me those 4 bullets, and I like what you're doing, and I believe in your space, then you're probably going to get funded. Now, with that, I'm going to give a little piece on how to get your message out. Since I spent almost all my career working with engineers and scientists and so forth, getting the message out can be a challenge. Because the first thing that somebody wants to do is jump right down and explain how the coefficient of friction on this is working, and and you're like lost them right away. So there's a couple things I'll leave you with. One is, people don't necessarily buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Now, when you're going to go out and build your team, because the hardest thing you're going to do early on is to build your team. Let's say you're going to build the next lunar lander. And you're going to go tell, I'm working on this lunar lander, we're going to build this thing. It's like, well, that sounds kind of cool. But if you try to sell somebody on what you're doing, they'll be interested for a little while, but that won't necessarily motivate them. That's how you get somebody to come on board with a job. Hey, I'm building a cool lunar lander, I need an engineer. I'm paying $85K a year. Great. Now, when you're building your team as your startup and you have no money, not even near $85K to pay an engineer, how do you get the A team? Because everybody wants the A team, nobody wants a C team. So everybody wants the A team. You want the best guy out there, and you're going to want him to work hard and be supportive and give everything you have, but you have no money to pay him. So the secret of talking to people, finding people on your team, is to give them your why. And that is more important. So if somebody comes up and says, if I believe that the next wave is going to be life on the moon, just throw that out there. And the guy goes, wow, that's exactly what I think. I think it's the next logical step. Well, guess what? You guys are halfway a team already. If you go out and say, we're going to build a lunar lander to go to this moon, yeah, whatever, those are hard to build. You get all sorts of things that come up. So there's a video you can go out and watch that I recommend. I met this gentleman about 5 years ago. His name is Simon Sinek. And he has got a video on YouTube, and I think it's called Simon Sinek, How Leaders Inspire. It's about 18 minutes long. But for folks that come out of the technical side, you'll learn that what you do doesn't really get you very far, and you'll find that the way you do it is really how you get there. That's how you'll find your team. If you go up, one of my customers, clients I was talking about, Deb with the greenhouse. If she is to walk up to someone and says, hey, I'm building the next generation hydroponics greenhouse. Cool. I just saw an article on, documentary on that just the other day on Discovery Channel. But that doesn't get you there. But she talks and says that I believe that the next generation, that the current model of growing food won't sustain the world. There's no way we can grow everything in Salinas and ship it around the world. I believe that the grow local, consume local is the wave of the future. You're going to grow that produce right here. It's going to be in your store at noon, fresh off the vine. That's going to be the future. Everybody's going to grow it where it has to be. And if you go, wow, I believe the same thing. I believe that's really the future. Well, there you go. You're halfway on my team. And then you start working your way down. Well, how do you do that? Well, there's only really one way to grow stuff all around the world, and that's in greenhouses. And the reality is it can only really be done in hydroponics greenhouses. But if I just jumped up and said a hydroponics greenhouse, well, there's a lot of people that build that. But if you start with the why, I've already got you on board when we believe the same why. Once you find somebody that believes your why, they'll join your team. So yeah, I'd go watch that video. It's about 18 minutes long, and if you've never done much in sales or done it, so I'll give you an example who's the classic why person. The classic why person is was probably Steve Jobs. Because Steve Jobs told you why we're going to change the world, why we believe that this is that. Oh, and by the way, we sell computers. Everybody else in the industry says, hey, we're HP, we sell the best computers, we got the best printers, we got the highest speed, we got the most memory, we got the most RAM. Yeah, whatever. But when somebody believes your why, they will jump on board and they'll go to the end of the world with you if your why is the same. Okay, that's probably about all the time I had, but I'm open to questions. Go on. Oh, actually, let me do my advertisement. So I'll give you guys that are interested. I do workshops once a month. They're all day Saturday. The next one is the 28th. I believe it's going to be at the College of San Mateo. don't know about it. Anyway, it's being done by, Rob does the marketing for it, so if you guys know where the meetups are, it's in meetups, startup to IPO. It's on the 28th. If you go in there and look those up, you'll find it. I think the early bird special is pretty good. It's like $100 if you wait to the door. But what we do is it's a 5-hour session where I go through everything like what we did here, but I'll go through line by line what to do, how to determine your business. And in between, I have a legal group. Royce Law Firm comes up and they'll do the top 10 legal mistakes that most startups do and how not to do those. So it's a good solid day thing. If you're interested to do it, there's some folks around that have been in it.
Yep, I went about a month ago. Really is awesome. I highly recommend it. Gary knows what he's talking about.
So,
Full throttle.
but it's a good thing. It's probably the only one in the valley that I know of that really goes into the level of detail that we do. So if you really want to get down, roll up your shirt sleeves and go through it, it's a good one. This one here is kind of arm waving and high level and stuff, but hey, I only had 30 minutes. But okay, I don't know how much time we have, but I'm willing to take any questions.
Again, how do you find that?
It's in the meetups. Are you familiar with meetups? Okay, it's just a group. So go out and go to meetups, meetups.com, whatever, and then you'll find it. And then once you're in there, there's a gazillion of them. You'll want to find idea to IPO. In fact, they're right next door right now. Rob's doing something over there with 3D printing. But just look for idea to IPO, and then he'll have a whole list of things. And I'm on the 28th, and I'm not 100% sure where it's at. I usually don't know until Rob finds it. Okay, we're booked. Here we are. Show up here. Yeah.
And they do a whole bunch of them. They did one on valuations.
Yeah, they do. He does a variety of them. I cover valuations. I cover everything you'll need to get your business started, from determining whether you have a good business case all the way through. This section we just kind of went through is just in the section of how to do your documents. But anyway, so.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead and shoot.
Well, I think I'm most done with my second or third draft of the business plan. I would love to just talk to you about it. Can I buy you dinner and just sit down with you and just go over it?
Yeah, we'll probably do something like that. So here's another thing I'll throw out, just as a little teaser. So everybody that comes to my workshop, I throw out a ridiculously stupid offer at the end. And I will sit down and help you either finish your business plan. Normally I like you to be a little further along that, but I'll sit down and do your executive.
We have a product too.
Yeah, new products too. Yeah, I'll sit down and go through that for you. I'll help you do all your documents, your executive summary and stuff, and I do those at stupid low prices. But what I do it for is a couple reasons. One is it allows me to stay in touch with all you entrepreneurs out there in the really, really, really early phases. And when I'm done working with you for a while, I know which ones I kind of want to keep my eyes on and which ones I can monitor, and then we can sort of develop some relationships as we go down the road, because this is a fairly long road. And it's all about, sort of like a marriage, when you get in bed with some of these people. So it allows me to come work. But anyway, take a look at that if you're interested. You can go down that road. And other than that, you done, or do you want any questions?
Yeah, more questions or discussion or?
Stump me. Throw me out. Throw something out there. I'll cook my feet. All right. Go ahead. You got it. You're thinking. You're breathing hard.
There's so many questions I have.
Don't even where to start,
I
huh?
don't know where to start.
Fair enough.
So when an angel investor invests in a company, is he looking to get bought out at the end, or does he want a portion of the company for as long as it goes?
Everybody, that's a pointed question. Really, what everybody wants out of it is a large return on investment. What does that mean at the end is undefined. If that's a buyout, if that's a... So the last thing that what investors like to do is you come back to him 24 months later and say, hey, here you go, here's the 5 times return on investment I was going to give you, and thank you very much. Usually what happens, though, is you're going to go and get another round of funding, and so now he's not going to jump off now because you're about to go big. So the problem is, once you go that, now the VCs are going to come and squish him. So to keep in mind the difference between when an angel writes you a check, that's coming out of his back pocket. That's his check. When a VC writes you a check, that's somebody else's money. So there's a big difference between that. Now, they're all responsible. At the end of the day, the VC gets fired for not managing his fund. The angel goes broke and loses his house. So there's a difference in the personal aspect of those checks. Yeah.
How much percentage they ask angels?
More than you want to give. Okay? So the formula generally, if you have a formula, then you can figure it out. It's a percentage of whatever it is. But in most cases with the angel, you're asking for more than you're worth.
Yes.
So no formula works in negatives like that.
What is that range?
And normally, you can expect around 30%. 30% is a good negotiating number. If you go straight off the bat and get your seed funding from a VC, it's going to be like probably 80%. But they'll give you more money, they'll take you further along, and if you're going to sell your company in 5 years, do you really care? Because 100% of nothing is not nearly as valuable as 10% of a big thing. so it all kind of, it works its way out. Now, if you want to keep control of your company and you want to run it and leave it to your kids, VCs and private investments probably not for you. If you're looking to move your company, get it acquired, 92% of all investments are acquisitions. If you're looking to get acquired, you're looking to move on, then all good. If you want control and you want to be the top dog and drive everything and run everything and keep it for years, find out money elsewhere. It's not the model that fit. Yes, you're going to say something?
No, I was.
Oh, just a yawn.
Yawning.
Okay. All right, that's it.
Yeah.
Beat them down. They're tired.
You guys question.
Here.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah. So when discussing terms with an investor, who are some of the best people to leverage when you want to negotiate the best value for both parties involved?
Well, they're going to bring in their legal team probably. That's a real tricky question. It's a tough one because at the end of the day, the investors are in the driver's seat. They're going to tell you what you're worth. They're going to tell you how much they're going to give you. They're going to tell you what you want, and you're going to probably either agree or disagree. And if they're fair, and if they're most of them in this valley are pretty okay. You'll arrive at a spot because they know when they're asking for the farm and they're expecting you to, what they're hoping is you'll just fold like a lawn chair and say, here, work this way. But anyway, you don't want to do that. You want to make sure you got a little backbone to you. So when you get stuck in your negotiation, you're not going to let our whole ship go down the tube because you can't negotiate. But I know it's a tough one. That's a real hard question to answer. But really, the VC, the investors own everything, and if you don't like it, walk. Now, if the checkbook's lying on the table, that walk is a tough walk.
Yeah.
If you can see it right there, it's right there. He's got it open.
Dropbox walked away from Steve Jobs, and he went to their office.
Yeah.
He said, I wanted to buy you, and they said no.
Yep. Yep. So if the deal's not right, the deal's not right. So it's a tough one though.
Make sure you have alternatives out there.
They don't have no alternatives when they go in there. They're startups. It's like looking for a job. You're just sitting there going, hire me, hire me, hire me. It's a tough one. Good.
Who should give the presentation to the VC? Like, should the person be from the company?
That's actually a good question. That's a good question. In the perfect world, it should be your CEO. And you should have all your team there. Because really what we're looking for is to see how does your CEO operate, how does your executive management team work. Now, as Sean said, sometimes the CEO, in the case of the truck guys, Don, he's a real sharp guy, he's a good engineer. He was the director of engineering. He designed the Tesla Roadster. Real sharp guy. Speaking in a room, not his strongest point. Now, I wouldn't bring in a smiling face. I would make it an employee of some site. Someone is associated with it. The best bet is if your CEO is not a good speaker, and hopefully your business guy is, and it can be then while he's speaking, he's the COO, give him some C-level thing. But if your CEO is truly not the right guy, then don't force it because, like you said, he'll kill the presentation because he's just not getting the message across. But you also don't want it to be a junior guy because then that begs the question, why aren't these two guys talking? And we probably know it's because they're not good speakers. But yeah, so in the perfect world, it's your CEO. If not, it's figure it out from there. CEO for a day. Yeah.
I was just wondering, any thoughts on using a convertible note versus, valuing the company when raising angel investment?
Sure. So the idea behind a convertible note, all that says is you're going to convert to something later. So if you're not going to pay me out in cash at the end, then my assumption is you're going to convert to something later, which means you're probably going to get another round of funding. The West Coast has always been convertible notes. The East Coast was always warrants, and now they've kind of mixed back and forth, and now you get convertible notes with warrants and stuff like that. And warrants are just sweeteners to the deal, usually for the initial investors. But convertible notes is just a standard. Some people try to get away from them, but at the end of the day, if you're not going to give me a term sheet that says at the end you're paying me, then at the end you're converting into something that's going to somehow pay somebody. You know what I mean? So convertible notes are standard. A lot of people don't like them just because it means that there's something else coming on, and I'm not necessarily going to get my money at the end of that. I'm going to get my money at the end of the next one probably. But none of them are bad. Like I said, when you're talking to your VCs and your investors, they'll kind of tell you what kind of deal they want to do. Yeah.
So this is kind of a wishy-washy question. In the startup teams that you see in the really early phase, do you find that most of these, the ones that are successful, are they the ones that have known each other for a long time, or they brought together each other for a specific skill set, or what happened?
No, I wouldn't say that my correlation is between knowing each other or not knowing each other. I'd say the number one thing that I think that helps most of them is they're willing to listen. Not listening probably kills more teams. I've worked with companies that just absolutely refuse to listen to anything I do. Not that I'm right all the time, but you gotta listen. You just gotta listen to the people around you. These people wouldn't listen at all. They totally failed in manufacturing exactly the way I told them how they were going to fail. And oh no, we're not going to do. We're not doing this. No, you got this connection with these guys. Go do this. Go do. Oh no, we're going to do this, and they wouldn't, and they failed. But that doesn't mean. But just listen. You've got a lot of smart people around you. Listen to what people tell you. Note it. If you don't necessarily agree with it, take it back, talk about it, whatever. But just listen. Listening is a biggie.
How'd you go from system engineering to a business guy?
Well, I always was kind of a business guy. The reality is I was a business guy out of school. I just fell into the engineering. And then I went through the ranks, and I did all the R&D for the FMC United Defense. I had like 15 years. But then I decided I really liked the business side better, and I actually capped out while I was there because I wasn't an engineer. So I couldn't go up through the program management ranks. They were a heavy technical company. And if you didn't come out of engineering, it was hard to go other ways. And even though I was kind of rounded, and so that was kind of how I ended up leaving there. But yeah, it was a pretty big deal. I was all upset because I didn't have an engineering degree. In fact, they said I wasn't even qualified to be a system engineer for the company. I've been a system engineer on more projects than any of the system engineers in the department. I go, whoa, get out of here. All right, I'm out of here. So anyway, yeah, company politics. Yes?
I heard, well, some of the startups who are successfully funded saying that you should have, there's a good number of, basically you should have like 3 or 4 or 5 people on the founding team so that the shares and also the voting rights don't get messed up in, when you have a lot of investors later. Is that true? And
we're gonna screw up your voting rights anyway and keep them on our side of the table, so we really don't care. But I would say in general, you want to have a few. There's certain, what you don't want is too many. So you got to be careful on your friends and family that you don't have 32 cousins that have all given you $100 and they all have a percentage of your company. That'll hose you up because it just gets too complicated to work with and everybody will walk away. But I'm not sure there's any magic number as far as the shares go. Obviously, when we come in, we want to see as few people having shares as possible because we want as many as we can have. As long as you know that going in, the negotiations are all pretty straightforward. The investors are there to take as much of a piece of the pie as they can. Your job is to not let them take any more than they have to get the check you want and the deal you're looking for.
And second related question about looking for money strategies is that we should, for example, now we're raising money and then we should have a list of, for example, 10 or 20 investors, and then we should go to talk with those ones who are not best investors for us. For example, they don't have the resources that we have besides money, and then we practice with them enough, and then we go to the ones who we really think are the best. I mean,
that depends.
Good to do?
That depends. Practice is good. If you do your homework and go to the right investors, you'll probably get funded quicker. This valley's small. If you go and give 8 or 9 pitches and don't do well, we're probably talking about you during the lunch breaks. And then when you go, so you could run out of, oh yeah, I heard about them. So you got to be a little bit careful. This is a small valley, so you don't want to go out and err too many times. But on the other hand, you're probably not going to go out and give your first pitch and get funded. That happened to my first startup. We went and gave our first pitch and got funded that day. 25 million. Walked in. What do you make the check to? Walked out. That was the .com. Wild West. That's not going to happen. That doesn't happen anymore. Learn. Yeah.
When you are in a really early stage, you are not going to have a CEO who is expert and things like that. So when you go to angel investor, can the idea of, like myself working there, so can the idea holder can talk in front of angel investors, or you see?
Yeah, when you don't have, you have whatever you have on any given day, and you can't change that. So you just have to work the best within that, And yeah, in early days you're not going to have all those things. Then,
But documentation is pretty much
document is standard. You got to have got to have the documentation. That's standard. You got to have all that. The better team you can, and in many cases, people are just looking to, hey, I need somebody to put on my slide. Can I use your picture? We answer my call if I call you once in a while. Yeah, no problem. Okay, here's an advisor. It's a tricky world. It's you know, a lot of moving stuff around. But at the end of the day, it's a stability thing and it's a growth thing. And in the early days of the seeds, you know, the expectations are less. But the expectations have changed a lot. I mean, what angels expect now is what VCs expected 15 years ago. You know, back in the day, you know, PowerPoint slide and an individual got you funded by an angel. You know, now angels want to see an MVP. They want to see a prototype. You know, it's like, really? But you're my seed. I mean, aren't you the one supposed to help me get to that part? You know, so the bar has been set a little bit, you know, and there's a lot of competition out there. Being an entrepreneur is a career path now. You know, it used to be just the crazy fringe and the unemployed. You know, and now it's a career path. People are coming out of high school as an entrepreneur. They're going to start a company. They're going to launch this company, and it's accepted now. It's become accepted. You know, parents are letting kids go out and do that. So the competition is fierce. There's an amazing amount of people out there starting businesses.
They're all over San Francisco.
They're everywhere. Yeah, this valley, it's insane. If I had $1 for every time I've met a group of kids that just got off an airplane last night from Italy, and they're looking for a house to crash in, all the time, dozens of times I've seen that. You know, that's commitment. When you say that, you say, okay, these guys are committed. I might be interested in tracking these guys a little while. Because there isn't very few people in the Silicon Valley that can jump on an airplane and fly to Italy and go do something like that without any parachute. But it happens in this valley all the time.
Such is the nature of Silicon Valley.
That's
Yeah,
it.
okay, good.
All right, guys. Yep.
So-
We might want to wrap this thing up. You probably, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just had a question about your item 3 there. Can
What
you
is
say a little
item
bit
3?
more about have
Oh.
permission for takeoff?
Oh, this is.
Okay. Well, let me see how I can answer that. What's the question here?
What do you mean?
Have permission
Have
for
permission
takeoff.
for
Bring it
Well, I
to the
think
field.
this is what we talked about during our first session here, which was making sure that, you know, everyone at home is comfortable with what you're doing here, and that you've got,
Well, I'll take that one. I'll take that one step further, because that's a biggie. That's a biggie. One of the biggest questions, I don't care if you're married or whatever, if you have a significant other, that day that you come home and say, hey, tomorrow I'm quitting. I'm starting that startup. That second half might say, I don't think so. And that conversation right there. So when you get ready to become a startup, there's some key things to keep in mind on what I call the squishy side. One, is your health good? This is a roller coaster ride. You're going to be up and down, and that might be just for lunch. You're going to have a lot of things that are just going to be all over the map and so forth. You need a support structure around you. You really need to know that your significant other is on board with this, because that day you come home and say, I'm done, I quit. You know, those kind of things. And it's important to have some people understand it, because you're going to have days where everybody thinks what you're doing is the slickest thing around. And this is huge. Love it. And the next day, absolutely everybody thinks you're a freaking idiot. Yeah. What an idiot. You think that's going to go? That is so stupid. That is so lame. It's never going to go anywhere. Yeah, well, here's my pet rock. Just made $1 million off it. You know, so you're going to be all over the map. So you need that support structure around you to kind of keep you in the middle, because you don't want to be up here and you don't want to be down here. Because the guy's up here, that's your sales guy. He's the guy that says your product's off the shelf, ready to go. We're packing it up and it's coming out tomorrow. How many do you want? You know, and then your engineer, he's the guy that's down here. This has so many holes in it. It's never going to be. You know, the reality is you're somewhere in between that. Your sales guy is always overselling you, and your engineering guy always says you're screwed up and the product's a mess. So anyway, on that.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'll
so,
make one more announcement.
okay, well, here, let me just get to this.
Okay.
I mean, these are some of the points that we
Yeah.
brought up last time. These will be available in this slide deck, but certainly in the case of, you know, starting your company and making sure everyone at home is comfortable with what you're doing, and that your team is who you're going to be working with extremely closely. So, you know, I'd say you don't be cavalier about who you put on your team. You want to go through some sort of vetting process.
Actually, I can give that to you even closer.
Yeah, okay.
Hire slow, fire fast. The hardest thing for startups to do is get rid of the people they brought on board because you probably knew them or you became friends and it's hard to do. But if after 2 weeks it's obvious that's not the programmer you wanted, get him out of there now. So hire slow, fire fast. That's the biggest, the health thing I can do there, because that guy hanging around is going to suck down the rest of your company, and it's going to happen. And then hiring is easy, firing sucks. You know, unless you just flat don't like the guy, but don't do it with a smile. It's bad. It's a bad one.
So, and in our second session, we emphasized the markets, which I really think from the engineering side is something you really have to focus on, which is, you know, not just the widget, but why is it? And Gary talked about that, you know, and I think it's being able to speak knowledgeably about the market and having done your due diligence in those areas, and, you know, to the extent that you've tested the market, and we talked about the lean startup and the minimum viable product, and all those things. And we use Steve Jobs as an example, which Steve Jobs, cast the computer in something other than megahertz and RAM and all that kind of stuff. It was really, that was the YouTube presentation.
Also, just for reference, you're not the only one doing what you do. If I had $1 for everybody's, oh, there's nobody in MySpace doing this, but I have no competitors like this. Dig a little deeper, they're out there. Because if you're in a market, you don't have any competitors, you may not be in a market. So if
There is no market.
yeah, that's right. If you have no competitors for a long time, then somebody's figured out something you haven't. But anyway, yeah, so.
Yeah. And then, as you know, in the competition area, really digging down and then understanding what the difference is between you and your competition. And I always think that even if the competition is out there, you can probably come up with a better way of doing things or an alternative way. I mean, even, which way is going to succeed, maybe nobody knows that. But if you think about in detail all the nuanced aspects that we talked about in the business canvas, I think you can clearly identify why you're different than your competitors in a variety of areas, and you should know those in terms of metrics. And then, as we just this last one, on going through the model, and I think that just sort of brought everything together that we talked about for your team working together to flesh out all those issues about customers and what your value add is and who your other partners are in order to succeed, thinking strategically about this, and as I say, your profits have to be greater than zero, as T is much greater than zero. You get out there, you have to make your projections somewhere be able to turn around. And then, as Gary talked, working your pitch. And I think as what people want to see these days is that you've got some customers in hand, that you've already been able to get some traction, that people are saying, yeah, we really like this, or we're already buying it, or something, and how to crack that nut. So I think those are pretty much all the things we wanted to cover in this 4 sessions. The slides will be available through
I'll get them
Rick's
in the
website.
next
And I
few
think,
days, just make sure I have your email address.
yeah.
Yeah, that you paid up.
And so, and then I guess Gary, you'll be around for a little while here, or day enough?
Thank you.
Good.
And so one announcement I forgot early on, which is that, and this is a little bit more fluid, but we've been talking about, so one of the big problems with satellite launches and projects is that no one's got enough ground stations to be able to track them. And so we're thinking about doing a ground station conference sometime in the September, October timeframe. Jeff Dillon has been looking into this, and we're kind of giving him all the feedback on it. So if you want to be involved in this more, talk to that guy over there. And he's got an interesting project over there, which has got a little Iron Man and whatnot. He's been doing some prototyping of the stuff.
Yeah, can I take a couple minutes to explain this?
Sure.
Okay. Well, my name's Jeff Dillon. I've been working with Sean for a couple of years. I have a video production company, and so I do aerospace events like this one. And since the last event that Sean gave on intellectual property and patent acquisition, this is now patent pending. And so in addition to being a software engineer and video producer, I'm also a propulsion engineer. And so I've solved Tony Stark's stability problem in the Iron Man suit. So, but in a more serious note, for example, a Coast Guard rescue helicopter costs $10 to $20 million. Civil Air Patrol helicopter, rescue helicopter costs at least $2 million. So what my project here would cost around, and it also, I guess more importantly than the money, it puts the pilot and the crew in harm's way on every rescue that they go on. And so what I'm developing here is a rescue platform for 1/20th of that price that doesn't use a pilot, for example. And so I prototyped it from a small quad on up here. This one in particular has solid rocket propulsion on the bottom, and then the pilot, or the payload I should say, is tethered down below like that, and it's already working. And so I'm scaling it up at this point, and so what I've done with this one is it's obviously a work in progress. I have a working turbine in the center, and the final prototype, or I mean the final device, will have a turbine much larger than this, about the size of this jar here, with 4 of these turboprops at each end, with a lifting capacity of about 300 pounds, which means it could pick up a person. It's operated remotely, and what the unique prospect of this is is that with the exhaust coming vertically straight down with the pilot down below, I have this device here that, using the Bernoulli effect, shields the payload from the exhaust. So it twists and goes like that. And so and what I found, one of the problems is when you lift off, especially in turbulent conditions, there's going to be pendulum sway. And so what this does is this swings this way. There's a natural damping effect of this mechanical device that will pull it back to neutral. So this thing is inherently stable. And so that's basically, in a nutshell, what I'm working on.
Nice.
All right, thank you.
When do you expect to have a flight test? How are you approaching that?
Well, right now, these turbines are very expensive. My price point that I'm looking at is I want to keep it about the same price as a Tesla Model S, so $80,000. That turbine right there was $2,500. The one that I need, the big center one, is about $20,000, and then it's surrounded by 4 turboprops. So we're looking at a cost of about $35,000 to $40,000, and so that's where I'm looking for, seed money.
And anyway, so I think that kind of wraps it up. You look at our SVSC webpage for a variety of events that are happening, whether they're talks, whether it's the Space Startup Weekend, whether it's the New Space Conference, and so forth. And you can always reach out to us at newspace@SiliconValleySpaceCenter.org, or you can always just look me up after to answer any of your questions. So anyway, thank you very much, and thanks, Gary. And we'll be around to answer questions.